So let's go back to, I'm gonna pull my screen up again. And where I was a discussion about site visits. Who would somebody who has had a site visit experience like to share how it went? What happened? And what your experience was.
Is there a Starbucks card involved?
Excuse me?
They're only a block from my office.
Yes.
Is there a Starbucks card available for this?
I think there is.
Okay,
Just
good. I'll do it.
George.
I'll do that. I had a great visit from the Ford Family Foundation for the project behind you when it was all sand and plans. And yeah, we were fairly well along on the proposal and gathering our funding, and it was we actually spent a lot of time on this. We thought about all the questions that I think they maybe even supplied us some questions, and we took some big sheets of a Post-it board and kind of mapped out all the questions and the answers and put them inside the big hall building. And we basically we coached each other up on what the answers might be. And, we spent some time preparing and got all our partners over there, and, and they were, it was really a good time, and it was good. It was every time you go through I felt like we went through the project again with all the partners, and it just helped us prepare for the questions, but not only that, just to keep thinking about the project and some of the things that we still had to do. So even though it was fairly far along in the project, I just felt like it strengthened the group on what the project was and who's going to do what. And I think it was good to have that extra time preparing.
So you guys prepared, you had the questions and you prepared all the answers in advance. Did you know who was going to be answering each question?
No, and I tried to get, the group, some of them were, some of the board members, the Doris Lions Club board members, I tried to get them to, as much as possible, answer the questions, but we had them kind of as a backup. They were on the wall, so they had them kind of in writing, and they also could ad lib as much as they wanted to. And if there was something that I felt like, personally, I felt like they really needed to emphasize, if they didn't get that, then I would, kind of keep an eye on the wall over there, and maybe, but we were kind of obvious that we were trying to get them the answers that we felt were important. And it showed preparation, but I think, yeah, that it was trying to get other people to speak. Sometimes it was a little harder, maybe because I talk too much, but you know what I mean? I think it helped them to be able to answer if everyone was trying to answer parts of it. They at least had seen some of the answers and kind of the direction we were going.
Great. So how many hours of planning time went into getting ready for the site visit?
Probably half a day.
Okay, great. For you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me. And then we got together a couple hours ahead and we posted all the answers and talked about them, and just kind of went over, just kind of programmed ourselves to what we felt. And there were things that we didn't have on there, but I think because we were just prepared, it kind of made it easier. And they're always easy anyway, and everybody kind of gets a little nervous and jacked up, but it kind of helped calm us down, just having the preparation done.
Great. Okay, thanks, George. And what was it, a Dutch Brothers or a Starbucks that's a block away?
I like Dutch Brothers, but I'll take Starbucks since they're only a block away.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's helpful. Does anybody have a a different experience with the site visit, and especially how you prepared, that you'd like to share?
We had a site visit at the Siskiyou Arts Museum, probably was either 4 or 5 years ago, but it was after the grant had been accepted and after we'd spent the money. And so there was some staff from what was then the Shasta Regional Community Foundation, and there might have been some members of the selection committee. I can't remember now, but it was generally a walk around. We showed them what we spent the money on, and beforehand, I think 3 or 4 of us just sat down and talked about what points we wanted to stress about it. But it was pretty informal. We didn't get any questions beforehand, and it was more of a social walk around, kind of get to know each other, finally get to meet some of the staff that you'd talk to on the phone. It was pretty low key.
Right. And, you know, they were looking for, did you actually accomplish the project? And what are you likely to come to them for next, right? So in a nice way, your site visit was kind of a bridge to where are you going in the future and what might they expect from you. So interesting that you also spent some time planning. How did you pick the team that was going to be at the site visit?
There was 2 board members expressed interest, and then one of the volunteers who was working that day, and then myself, because I was just interested, and it just kind of whoever wanted to meet on the day and was available too.
Okay, great. And that's lovely for an informal site visit like that. And George is right. Site visits can feel stressful. So you do want to put some practice in and prepare everybody so that you're ready when it happens. So as somebody who spends quite a bit of time doing site visits, I'll go through a couple of tips. Like George was kind of describing, when I think of a site visit, I think of somebody as kind of being the project manager for them. They're the person who's going to pick who's going to be at the site visit, and it's their responsibility to get everybody ready. And when I was a grant writer for a school district, our superintendent did that. And he put a lot of emphasis on preparing for the site visit. The whole reason in doing it was so that we did well, but so that we calmed down and we felt like we were prepared. And so we didn't need to be nervous. So for our site visits, we would actually meet for 2 or 3 hours as a group. Everybody that was going to be at the site visit had to show up. The superintendent assigned questions in advance to us, so we knew which questions we were going to have to answer. And usually we would prepare the answers and, you know, share them if we needed to in advance. And then during that site visit prep meeting, we would actually go through and answer the questions so that everybody else could hear where we were going to go with our answers. And so then they knew what we were going to say, so they could then add on to what we were going to say because they already had an idea of what was going to happen. So I really think it's valuable to have that meeting with everybody that's going to be involved. They're fun. And when you actually get to the site visit, feeling like you're a team and that you're all contributing in a meaningful way is a great way to have a good experience. Now, having said that, there are some ways that you can go sideways on a site visit. And the first one is somebody that dominates conversations. So when I pick members for the site visit team, it really wants to, the best message to convey is that everybody is involved in the project and everybody knows how they fit in. So having somebody that really dominates the conversation is not particularly helpful. The other kind of site visit participant that isn't helpful is somebody that actually has another interest besides your organization. So they might start talking about another project they're working on with another organization. Also not helpful to your effort. So having the right people really matters. Sometimes the funders will say, we want a board member, a staff member, and then maybe one of your clients. And so then your job is to find the people that meet what they're asking for. My other advice, and this really comes out in the article, is that the funders like to think that they're a consultant sometimes, that they know a lot about organizations and can provide input. So having a conversation with the site reviewers about what the challenges you're facing at your organization, it actually makes for a really interesting conversation. What you find is the organizations that are the most confident during the site visit, they're willing to share their vulnerabilities and what they're not doing well. Organizations that don't have a lot of experience with site visits want to paint a rosy picture about everything and only talk about what you're doing well. But if you can move past that and talk about the challenges, you're going to have a much more meaningful conversation. So I encourage you to go in that direction. Okay, any other advice about site visits from folks who have done one?
I just remember that they had a limit on the number of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we didn't invite one of the people, they said, well, we're so-and-so. And it's like, well, you limited us to so many people. So anyway, so that was kind of interesting. And then we spent a little bit of time on trying to decide who should be there, because if we only had so many people, who should be there? So I think we had a lot of thought about, who was really bought in and who was really positive and kind of those kinds of things. We spent a lot of time on that. Not a lot, but some time.
Yeah, and you find that, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a slight question. We don't, a site visit kind of means that you're going to a place, but in our organization, we don't have an office or any one place that's our central location. How would you handle that?
You mean outside of COVID time? I think it would be very appropriate to meet in any public community space, like a library, where it's quiet and you can have a good conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so George said put time into who's gonna be there. What you find is the more site visits that you do, you'll find the right team of people that can have a multi-person conversation that flows, and that's what you're looking for. So when I find those golden people that are really good in site visits, I keep asking them again to participate. I also try and let the person who's going to lead the site visit know exactly who's going to be participating. I make sure that I know how long we have for the site visit, and I make sure that it's my responsibility to keep track of time, not the site reviewer. Often you'll find that while they say they're only going to be there for 90 minutes, they may want to go much longer. And that's fine, but at 90 minutes, you better remind them that they said they could only stay this long, and that if they need to go, they're welcome to. So I take kind of monitoring the time on as our internal responsibility. Okay. So we've got a list of questions, and we have some site visit participants. That would be you guys. So we're ready for our activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a question, and I'm going to invite you guys to supply the answers. And Kathy, I see that there's something in the chat box. Would you mind reading what that is?
Actually, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Actually, it's what George mentioned before about Jessica getting a Starbucks card because of her background.
Oh, nice.
So we all agreed. While you were gone, we all, all did that.
Actually, Amy had some input. She just didn't get she wanted to give some input, and I wanted to help her give some input.
Okay, Amy.
Oh, George, aren't you the sweetest? I was just thinking about site visits, and actually I have done a lot. I used to be the volunteer programs coordinator at the Oregon Food Bank.
Uh-huh.
And so the grant writer would call us, and I would gather the best volunteers, the ones that were the most passionate, and we'd try and schedule it during their shift, during the time that they would be there. And they might not know everything about the organization, but they were really passionate, and that was always like a positive experience. So I just wanted to share that one.
Yes. Has anybody had a bad experience with a site visit? I think other than—
I can say that Crystal
Yes.
Oh, Crystal came down to Hornbrook, and some of our finest citizens were out swearing and screaming in the street. So that was a little awkward.
Awkward, but I bet it didn't affect what you guys had to say about your project.
No, not exactly, but it was kind of strange.
Kind of demonstrated the need even more.
Yeah.
George knows a lot about Hornbrook, so yeah. But no.
Can I jump in for a moment, Meredith?
Sure.
Because I would just like to say, as far as site visits go, one that was totally unexpected, we had a site reviewer who was very into the economics of the project. So they grilled everyone in the site to make sure that they knew exactly how much the project was going to cost and how all the resources were going to be used. So I'd encourage you to, at least make everyone aware of that part of the grant process.
That's one of the things we had on the wall too, all the numbers, so that if anybody had to grasp at them, they were there in front of them.
That's a great idea. Mm-hmm.
Right. So not just having the treasurer be the person that was going to supply all the financial information. Good. Yeah, that's
That's right. They asked board members for, that information, and, everybody who was at the table got asked a question about the finances. So it's worth doing.
Okay. So we're going to give you a couple minutes to answer the question. And it looks like I need to go out of stop share and back in. There we go. Here's our list of questions. So let's take the first one. And so we're looking for about a 2-minute answer. Please help me better understand the problem that you're addressing with this grant proposal. So what am I asking? I'm basically saying, tell me your needs statement. So who would like to be our first volunteer? Is that you, Abby, volunteering?
I was nodding along with you.
Well, thank you, Abby.
Um,
Would you mind taking that? If I ask, can you share, help me understand
Alright.
the problem?
Say that again.
Help me understand the problem that you're trying to solve with your project.
So in September of this year, 2020, the Slater fire destroyed 212 homes in our rural frontier community. Happy Camp lost 38% of its housing. Approximately 70% of Slater fire households were uninsured or severely underinsured. Our residents describe a deep connection to this community and this land. They don't want to leave, but now have nowhere to go and no way to rebuild.
Okay, great. I can see that for your community. Since Justina and you work together, Justina, can you share what the challenges are for your organization in thinking about how you're going to address this problem?
So part of our challenges are, I was reading something else and that's not the right one. Part of our challenges are having access and to resources in our community, and we have a very limited, financial assistance when it comes to creating access to recovery. Another issue we have is the fact that our community had a shortage of housing already. So what we lost in the fire also has created even more of a deficit in housing for the people. So the population isn't able to return without completely rebuilding those lost homes.
Okay, perfect. Perfect, you guys. So Abby shared the challenge with the fire and some statistics around it, and then Justina followed up with what does it mean to your organization and what are your barriers to being able to do that work. So great, perfect need statement. Okay, you guys, let's go on. I'm going to give this one, Hollis, are you around? I'm going to give you number 2. Can you share some more details on what you're planning to do with your seed project? And Hollis, you're muted.
Sorry, hi. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. So,
okay, cool.
so I'm
Yeah, so how do I start?
you to talk about your deliverables from your project charter, right? What's your project and how are you breaking it up into pieces?
Okay, so there's a couple of different sections that I'm thinking of. One is an educational aspect where we interface with the schools and the community at large to create workshops and increase knowledge of how to acquire and save your own seed. And so that is one aspect of it, which would include like some really basic stuff for like elementary school and get more complicated for like the high school into like, you know, adult gardening. And then another aspect would be to increase, like it's actually a research kind of area where we would be increasing the seed stock in the local area with the goal of doing breeding projects to create new varieties that are endemic or like locally adapted and grow well in our area, regardless of heat. I mean, in regards to like heat, cold, drought, frost, all these different adaptive characteristics. So creating new varieties. Those are like the two main areas that I've been thinking of. But a third one would also be just increasing local food availability as well.
Great.
That sound
Great. It's coming together. And then the timeline for when you're going to do it also would come right from your deliverables section of your project charter. So that's a great way to attack that question. Okay, I'm going to read the next one and then I'm going to ask for a volunteer who hasn't gone yet. So number 3, who else is working on the problem and how does their approach differ from or complement your approach? Who'd like to take that one? I'll have to assign it.
This is Michelle. I'd like that one, please.
Okay, great, Michelle.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear just fine.
Okay, good. So I have the example of food programs, and many of the food programs in our community are food banks and commodities who get what they get, and that's it. And those are what they have to offer. Our program differs in that we give out a grocery outlet food card so that the family can go and purchase the items that they need for their household, whether that be fresh milk or eggs that might not be, or fresh fruits and vegetables that might not be available through the food banks.
Great. So the other people that are working on the problem are the food banks, and they're great, but what they offer is sometimes limited and often not fresh. Great. So I love the response. The answer for this question is about knowing who else shares your mission and describing for the site visitors the lay of the land, right? So it's not about saying, yeah, we're the only one working on this project, so we deserve all the funding. It's really showing that you're collaborative and that you're working with other people on the project. So would anybody else like to give number 3 a stab? Who else is working on the problem and how does their approach differ from or complement your approach?
Hi, Meredith. This is Arthur.
Great.
So the project that I'm working on is the Wairika City Aquatic Center. And so thankfully we have a pretty large group of volunteers, Wairika Splash, and that includes some members of the community who just really like the idea of having a pool. Other people actually worked at the old pool that unfortunately closed. And between concerned members of the community and people who were actually paid staff members for a nonprofit organization, they've been a fantastic group of volunteers to work with on this project. And they've been very helpful organizing the public input meetings, getting cost estimates for various aspects of the project. And they've been just wonderful to work with.
Terrific answer, Arthur. So one, it shows you appreciate your volunteers. You probably are good with working with volunteers because they want to work with you. So that's a perfect answer. Okay.
Well,
very nice. And while you're unmuted, Arthur, how will you know if your work is successful?
Well, ideally that we would get the grant, we'd get the funding and be able to break ground on the project with a successful opening estimated for 2025. That being said, we applied for the grant last year. We were not successful, and here we are trying again. So I think it's a testament to the strength of the community that despite setbacks, despite, Sisyphus watching the boulder roll back down to the bottom of the hill, that they're still willing to grab a hold and give it another push.
Great, perfect. So capital project, it's successful if that thing, in this case a pool, gets built. So your context around that was great. All right, let's see, Amy, what will be different as a result of your project, and how will the grant help this effort?
Well, our goals are to get a community space for Hornbrook, and what will be different is that we have a community space for Hornbrook and a place for people to meet, including all the volunteer boards, and have socials and fundraisers and all that kind of thing for the community. Since we don't have anything right now, that would be a dramatic change for the community. And what's the second half?
And what'll be different if your agency gets the grant?
If we get the grant, we'll be able to move forward, mostly doing renovations to make sure it's safe and code compliant for the public, and that we can open things promptly.
Yes.
Use
Good.
the building that we're looking at.
So that question kind of begs for you to say, well, we're committed to this project. So if we don't get the grant, we will still move ahead with our fundraising efforts, and eventually we'll get it completed. The grant will make it happen a lot faster. Right?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yes.
And while you're unmuted, what have you learned from this experience of planning out this project?
Organizing an entire community is a lot of work. So we're working now on strategic planning, getting our annual plan and our operating budget so that we have a more clear picture to move forward with what we're going to do with our current capacity. So yeah, we had a good meeting this past week and had a lot of new community members interested. And we're starting to just seriously tell them that they need to help us, and how can they help? What can they do? And making people really consider this. And
perfect. Your sincerity comes out, and your passion in how you answered that. Okay, Lydia, you ready? Can you please share an update on the fundraising efforts? Have you had any great surprises or disappointments along the way?
Well, one of the biggest surprises has been that our donation fund has been growing by leaps and bounds, and people have been volunteering more time as well and helping us get other aspects set up so that we can go forward. This has been the biggest shot in the arm of energy and funds that we've had to date. It's amazing.
Okay, again, I don't know that I could have answered that any better, because you're saying our organization has life, we're engaging new people, it's showing in our fundraising efforts. Who wouldn't want to contribute to an organization that's got such a positive spin on it? But oftentimes, what they're wanting to know is, did any grants come in between when you asked us and when we're here for the site visit? So that's a good time to talk about those too. But what you said was perfect. Okay, so the next question is about your board. That'd be a great question for a board member to answer. Who's responsible for ensuring the financial health of the organization? Who'd like to tackle that? Kathy or Joe, can I put you on the spot?
Joe, maybe I'll let you start with that. Who's
Who's responsible for ensuring the financial health of the organization?
Well, that responsibility usually falls with the board, and they're supposed to be kind of on top of the finances of the organization. And they work together with the executive director and the management team to stay informed. And but the ultimate responsibility is going to lie with the board.
Okay, well, that's good to know. You almost sound like you have some depth behind that answer. You'd make an ideal board member. Okay.
There we go.
Yes.
we think he is?
Okay, good. So they're asking, is the board engaged in the finances? And they might come back with, so how does the board do that? How does the board know enough about the resources to know what's going on? So that would be a great question for a board member to show the level of engagement that you have. Okay, number 9. What are your organization's highest priorities and how is that documented? That's really a strategic planning question. Jessica, are you still with us? You want to tackle that one?
Okay, sure. I don't have any paper in front of me written or anything written down.
That's all right. You'll do great.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
What are your organization's highest priorities right now, and how did you document that? It's really asking about your strategic planning efforts.
Okay, which we need to do.
Yeah.
Our highest priority is making sure that our patients are being seen. And that's been difficult in COVID times. And particularly we work in Guatemala, and it's they have had severe travel restrictions. And so we haven't been able to we haven't been able to see patients. Just so the whole last 6 months is it almost as if that question doesn't apply. Because we haven't been able to do any work. So I'm not quite sure how to answer.
Well, actually, I think you're doing a really good job of talking about you've got kind of this very clear mission and you can't get to it now. So figuring out how you continue to do your work when you have all these restrictions on it is really your highest priority. It's adapting to this external environment that's so different now.
Yeah, they just opened the travel restrictions a couple of weeks ago. And so just within the last couple of weeks, because what we do is we train community health workers to do basic vision care in this remote jungle region in Guatemala. And because there's no eye doctors in the entire state, and so they're it. So they've been able to see in the last couple of weeks like a few patients, but nothing like before. But because it just opened, there was travel restrictions open 2 weeks ago, we actually just broke ground on a clinic this week that we've been fundraising for 6 years. So that was a win for us.
Great, great. And then if I was you and I was answering that question, I would say, we know we need to do some strategic planning because of all these changes. And so we're applying to the Ford Family Foundation for funding so we can do so.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Okay, good. Now the number 10, what will you do if your fundraising plans fall short? There isn't a right or wrong answer for that, but you do need to have an answer. So if you were planning to do 6 different workshops in the year, you'll have to figure out what your backup plan is What can you commit to if you don't receive the grant or if you only receive part of it? And in that question, it's really the funders are asking, if we don't give you everything you asked for, are you still going to be able to do your project? And for some of you, the answer is no. Unless we get full funding, we can't build the building, or we can't do our program. But for others of you, you actually may have a smaller version that you can do. So it's a literal question. Do you have a plan B, and what is it? So then number 11, we're ready for this because we talked about it during the second class. How do you plan to sustain your efforts after the end of the grant period? So Lydia, can I go back to you on that one? Lydia's like, no, you can't. I don't hear Lydia. Who would like to take that one?
Sorry, I just had to say goodbye to my daughter.
Oh.
So you want 11? How do you plan
Yes.
to? Okay. Well, in our case, if we get all the funding we need to pursue the plant project, it will be self-sustaining by a certain point. That is 6 months is what the plan is. And if it's not self-sustaining, then we haven't done our job by that point.
Okay. And what will make it self-sustaining? Tell me how it's going to sustain itself.
We already have markets lined up for our product. The sales of the products will help regenerate the income that we need to keep producing.
Okay, perfect. Hollis, can I ask you that same question? How are you going to sustain your seed education and seed growing program after the end of the grant period?
Okay, so that part, I feel like there's a lot that still needs to be developed, but there is potential to sell seed itself. And what I was thinking was having like garden starter packs, where it wouldn't be just like individual seed varieties. It would be like a mix of like this and that, like tomato and corn and such. And if you buy this, you'll have like a small garden space area of these certain varieties. So that was one thing I was thinking. With the workshops, I don't know if they would be necessarily sustained, but what my goal is eventually to get to where this area has its own seed varieties, which would create a value in itself because those varieties can be sold. But that's far down the line. So I'm not exactly sure. It's like I'm still developing this idea.
Hollis, you just rocked that answer. I mean, I could really see you had a direction of where you were going, and that last part of you're still developing it, that made sense for your project, your very large project. So nice job. Okay. So having gone through them, we understand what the questions are. So then the work is just for each specific project to have thought out the answer. You don't have to write it out, but you need to know where you're going. You need to have direction in each answer. The site reviewers will hear that, and that will give you the confidence to get through the site visit feeling good about your project. Great. Okay, any questions about that? Site visits. They always make me nervous, but the process of preparing for them, again, calm me down so that it's okay to be nervous going into it, but I also have to feel prepared. Great. Okay, so site visits come at the beginning of a project What comes at the end of the project are final reports. And final reports are just as important as the application itself, because you're talking about how you actually spent the funds that you were given. And it also provides another bridge for you to talk about what you're going to do next and hint at what you're planning to come back to that foundation for in the future. So there are common elements to final project reports. I'll share what they are and then we'll look at an example. So almost every final report requires what I call a budget versus actual document. We'll look at one in just a minute. They all require them because the foundations have to report to the IRS on who they give their money to and how that organization spent its money. So they're required by law to go back to you and say, did you spend our money? What did you spend it on? We need that information for our tax purposes. The final projects also give you an opportunity to retell the story that you shared in the grant application. And this time you get to talk about the outcomes, the happily ever after, and how far you got towards realizing that. I think a really good way to share the success of a project is to use photos and to talk about the partnerships that were involved, in order to leave an impression with the funders about who your organization is. So we'll see that in the final report that I shared. And again, there's also time when they ask, is there anything else you want to tell us about? Which they often ask in final reports. It's a way to help them see where you're going to be going next. So you're setting up your next request to them. So I have shared an example in the next few slides. This is a project I did here in Yachats where we built a skate park and did a big mural on the side of a retaining wall. And it was a great community project. And so the first thing we're doing is we're sharing our budget to actual. And I want to say in your PowerPoint, the actual documents are embedded in the PowerPoint, so you can pull them out of the PowerPoint if you want to use them. So here what we have is the green columns are the budget. So this is what we asked for in the grant application. There's a cash column, an in-kind column, and a total. And then in orange are the actual amounts that these things actually cost or were paid out. So here you can see, because it's an actual amount, there might be cents, and so we have extended the digits out to decimal places, whereas the budget we've rounded up to dollars. In this budget, we have the expenses on top and the revenue on bottom. There's no reason, you can do it either way, it works. And we have the different sources of funding. Here was our county cultural coalition and our Oregon Community Foundation that funded the work. So that looks nice and tidy. And then we did, this was a cover page that shows the skate park and the mural that we did. And then the answers to the questions, you can see we're showing the where they put down concrete for it, the actual painting of the mural, and the happy kids. including there's Meredith in her sunglasses on the skate park itself, right? So things have changed a little bit more now because so many of the forms are done by online submission, but I really think it's important to show photos. So if they're having you answer the questions, and you know, the questions that they're going to ask are, tell us what you plan to do and then what you actually did. If the results weren't what you expected, tell us why they were different. What did you learn from the experience, and what's going to be the long-term benefit to the community? So they're pretty standard questions. They don't expect for projects to go the way that you've outlined them. Well, plenty of funders are happy to hear the unexpected things that happened, or the progress that you made that didn't get you all of the way, but still it was enough to make an important difference in the community. So I think it's important to be to tell a story, even if there were side path trips that meant that it took longer or you didn't get as much done as you want. Those are all interesting things that you can bring up in your final reports. The important thing is you have the attention of somebody at that foundation, and usually the program officers are going to read your stories. So if I submit an online version that maybe doesn't allow me to use pictures, I'll still take the version that I want to tell with pictures, and I'll send that to the program officer that helped me in the first place, right? So it's okay to do a couple different versions. This story that I'm writing in my final report also makes a nice article for your newsletter if you have one at your organization, right? Okay, any questions about final reports?
Yes, I do, because I'm writing one right now.
Yeah.
I gotta go back and check again, but I don't think I was given any kind of parameters on this final report. So this is kind of nice to have. And there was a budget, the main, the before and after, or the actual, and that's part of it, but that's really the only thing that they said. So I kind of wanted to tell a story. So I think what you said really helped me today, because some of the things that we were after with the results are already happening, and it's like pretty amazing to watch. But that helped today to hear that, because that's really what I think I want to emphasize was they got the work done, but the use of it is happening. And I guess that's, it's kind of what I wanted to talk about, but it was confirmation of what you're saying today.
Yes. And going back to session 2, the story is the need statement. The project is what rescues the need, and then the change or the results happen after that. In your final report, you want to remind them what the problem was, because they're not going to go back and read your grant. So you want to put that into the report, remind them what the project was, and how it changed, or how you had to adapt it to COVID or whatever circumstance, and then what the results are and how you're documenting those results. So if you think about it in that story format, you're going to do great.
Thank you.
Yeah, just remember, you're going to need to re-articulate the problem, because you've been living with it in this project, but they haven't.
Thank you.
The other thing about final reports is they often give you more space to actually write. So in the grant applications, they may really limit how many characters or words you use, but you can share a lot more in the final reports. So take them seriously and think of it as this relationship building activity.
It seems like some of the foundations also like to pull things out of final reports for quotes that they use for publicity.
Absolutely. So those pictures that you're taking during the project very well may end up on their annual report. And in fact, that skateboard mural ended up in the Oregon Arts Commission's annual report, which we were thrilled with, right? So you're doing, you're helping them do their work. Okay, very good. So if anybody's working on a final report and you'd like me to review that in November, I'm happy to do that too. It's part of your grants program. All right, so let's talk about evaluation. So the information that I'm gonna present today actually comes from this book that's put out by United Way called Measuring Program Outcomes, A Practical Approach. And I included it in the slide set because if you Google that, you can pull it up as a PDF, as a reference for you. It used to be a publication that United Way put out. They charged $5 to send you a copy. It was a great publication, but it's no longer in print. So you can save it as a file. Now, the other reason that I'm pointing out this particular book is because evaluation terms there are different systems for how to explain what the terms are. And so I'm using the system that United Way has outlined in this book. So here we go. So first of all, let me ask you this. Why do we need evaluation? What do we use it for? There are several answers, so let's hear some. Why is it important to have evaluation?
Absolutely. Because if you don't evaluate it, you can't see what you've done appropriately and what you haven't.
Okay.
You know, what measures up to the goals you're trying to reach.
Great. So you know, so you learn about your work so you can change how you're doing your work and do it better. That's a great answer. What else? Why do we need evaluation?
So that others can figure out if we're doing the work that they think needs to be done.
Yeah, so the people that are funding this work, how do we tell them what we did, right? How do we tell them how effective it was? That's a great answer. What's another reason that we need evaluation?
I would say that you need to have something written so that if 3 years from that point, you have a new board or new staff member, they can pull up that document and see the wisdom that was collected from that grant. Otherwise, it's just, you don't know how it worked out.
Yes, yes, terrific. And another answer to me would be, if you have a program, you need to be able to describe to the clients that you're marketing to what their expectations can be. How are they going to benefit, or how will their lives change after the end of going through this program? What are they going to get, right? So those are all great answers. We can think both. I heard internal reasons so that we get better at doing the system, or in 3 years, we know how to replicate what we're doing. And then kind of external reasons. So the funders know what we did. so that we can promote the good work that our organization is doing, and we can put numbers on, here's what we have accomplished, right? So they're both good reasons. And most of us learn how to do evaluations because grant applications require it. So there are all sorts of good reasons why we should be doing evaluation, but we're waiting to do it until the funders say you can't get a grant unless you do this evaluation work. And I think that's a fine reason to be sitting here learning about evaluation, because the grantors require it. So we need to know how to do it. So evaluation has changed a lot in the last 20 years. It used to be, when we did a program, that the things that we looked at, what we wanted to share, were things like, well, how much did we spend? How many people got served? And did they like what they got? But actually, none of these things are talking about how people have changed or how the environment has changed. So in the olden days, they weren't really expressing how people changed, just what happened to those people. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. If I said that we're spending $125 on each child through our eye clinic program, what does that mean? We're spending money, we're doing some kind of treatment, but what do we actually want to know?
How many kids did we help?
And help with what?
Eyesight or whatever the services.
How many kids found out that what their eyesight was, and as a result of that, how many got glasses? Right? Because kids that got glasses can see better, and and maybe that will help them in school, right? So the change is that they spend $125 on each child, and they see better as a result. So their change is they see better. The treatment is that they had a screening. Okay. How many people were served? Okay, now here's the eye screening again. 60 adults attended the screening, and that's great, but that didn't say what happened. As a result, 20 of them were found to have some need for corrective eyesight. Okay, here's another one. Client satisfaction. We did a program, and we found out that 90% of the participants said they were really satisfied with the EMT training course. Well, that's great. They liked it. But what do we really want to know? As a funder, what do you really want to know?
How many people's lives have been changed by being able to see better?
Not see better. So this an EMT is a.
How many went on to career or able to further their certificates or certification training?
Yes, so they liked the course. That's great. That just means that the treatment was legitimate. Yeah. But did they learn anything in that course? Did they apply what they learned to actually helping save people? Those are the changes or the outcomes that we're looking for. Okay? So that's where we get to this ladder or the hierarchy of effects. And I'm going to show that there are different levels of importance as you go up the ladder. The participation and the reaction rungs of the ladder are part of the treatment itself. They came and they participated in the program, and the reaction is they liked it. They were interested. They felt good about the activity. They enjoyed the educational methods. But until you get above that red line, you're not actually talking about how their lives have been changed, right? So above the red line at the learning thing, when you say that somebody has learned knowledge, their lives are changed because they know more, right? That's great. The next step beyond learning is they not only learn something, but they're using that knowledge to change their behavior or the way that they do things, right? And then the final step is they not only learned something, they used what they learned to change behaviors. And as a result of that, they're helping improve their community or the seed diversity in their region or social connectedness within their community. So what we want to be able to do, the new language of outcomes are we have to express how people have changed. Okay. So now that we have that lingo, let's create a program and then evaluate it or measure its impact. So let's start with what our future vision is. What do we want to achieve? Kind of what's our mission? What are we out there? Well, let's pick, we want to improve dental health in young people. Okay, that's what we want. That's our outcome, right? So there's this term called backcasting, which is if you know what you want, what we want is more children brushing. That's our future vision. So then we go back into the past or to the present actually, and now we have to create a series of things that we're going to do that are going to get us to that vision. Okay? So if our vision is more children brushing, what can we do to get there? And so let's build a program that's going to get us to our vision of more children brushing. Well, let's start out with something simple. Let's give them toothbrushes, okay? So we're going to distribute a bunch of toothbrushes to kids, and as a result of that, they're going to brush more. So we've created a model for our program, okay? Let's see if that model works. If we distribute the toothbrushes, are more children going to brush? And let's see if that works. So here's the evaluator. We hand out the toothbrushes, evaluator, have you been brushing more? And the children say, no, we use the toothbrushes for an art project. So what have we learned? That didn't really work. Our program model that if we give kids toothbrushes, that they'll use them to brush their teeth was a bad program model, right? So if that didn't work, what should we do? How could we improve that program model? What are some things that you would do differently if let's develop a better program. What should we do?
Have a workshop and show them how to use the toothbrush.
Yeah, let's teach them how to brush their teeth. Let's give them a toothbrush. Let's teach them how to use them. What else can we do?
You could give them some toothpaste.
Yeah, I like that. What else can we do if we want to have it be effective?
See a giant tooth like mascot thing like coming to their school.
Yeah, like some kind of incentive. Make it fun, right? Make them want to brush their teeth. I like that. What else can we do?
About exams before and like a year later or something.
Yeah, that would actually help us measure that they were doing it. But right now we're just trying to figure what can we do in our program to actually end up with the result of more children brushing. So we've got toothbrushes, education, the big tooth to make it fun.
How about more parental involvement?
And get the parents involved. I love it. Okay, great. So now what we've done is we've developed a better program model. I'll even say a good one, right? And so we have a good program model that we think is going to get us to this outcome of more children brushing. So now that we've got our model, how are we going to measure it? If we do all these things, how are we going to measure that more children are going to brush? What are your thoughts? What are some guesses about how we could measure whether children are brushing or not?
Can you use some kind of a handout where they can mark it up each day or something like that? Like
A calendar that you could maybe give the kids stickers, and if they brush their teeth, they get to put a sticker on it. I like that. That's a great idea. How else could you measure whether kids are brushing more?
Survey their parents.
Yeah, survey their parents. I love that. Remember those red tablets?
oh yeah.
You could use those because those are is their plaque on their teeth, right? So we have a bunch of different ways we could do it. So what evaluation tools are we going to use? Here's some potential evaluation tools. A parental survey about brushing habits, a child checkoff calendar. We could use that red dye. We could actually look at their dental exam records over time if we wanted to really drill down, pun intended. So which one should we use? Well, when you think of evaluation tools, one of the things is how easy is it going to be to do, and how costly is it going to be? So for me, either one of the first two would be a reasonable evaluation tool to give to our program model. Which one should we pick? Maybe we'll do both of them. Okay. So now we're ready to set up our program model using some evaluation terms. Inputs are the resources that you put into the program. So in our first program model, the one that wasn't very good, we said we're just going to give out toothbrushes. The inputs would be toothbrushes and children. So the inputs, the problem with our first model was we didn't have any activities. The activities are the treatment that you do. So in our new program model, the better one, we're going to distribute the toothbrushes. We're going to do education with the students and the parents, and we're going to do some follow-up checks and encouragements. So those are our activities or treatment. The outputs, it's not the same as outcomes. The outputs are how many the outputs are the treatments that participants got. So the children received toothbrushes, the children received education, the children participated in checks and encouragement. Now, they did the treatment, but it hasn't resulted yet in a change. As a result of those outputs, we can reasonably expect that the children will have learned new behaviors, brushing their teeth, and that they will be encouraged to do it more. So the outcomes are the actual changes that happen usually after participating in the program activities. Okay, so what we hope for here is more children brushing. All right. Now, the very last part to the program outcome model is more children brushing is too vague a term for most funders. They want you to quantify exactly how much more brushing those children are doing. So we call them measurable outcomes when the results are quantified. So an example of a measurable outcome would be, as a result of this child dental health program, we saw a 20% increase in the number of children who brushed their teeth twice a day at Jonesville Elementary School, as measured by a parental survey tool. So we've created a program model. We created the evaluation tools to measure it. And now we can quantify how successful our program was. That's evaluation theory. Okay? Did I go too fast? Did it seem reasonable as I went through it? Let's do another one. So this one we're going to call a logic model. And a logic model is actually just what we went through before. It's a series of if-then relationships that express the program's model of change. So here's one. Let's go through this. See if you believe in these steps. If we invest time and money, then we can provide tutoring 3 hours per week for a whole school year to 50 children. If we provide tutoring, then students struggling academically can be tutored. If the students that are struggling academically get tutoring, then they'll learn and improve their skills. If they learn and improve their skills, they'll get better grades. And if they get better grades, they'll be able to move on to the next grade level on time. So each of those if-then statements kind of makes sense, right? So we've created a program model that is believable. So let's use our evaluation terms. The inputs are the resources we put into the system. The activities are what we're going to do, like the deliverables in our project charter. The outputs is the number of participants that get the treatment. So in this case, 50 children will get, that are struggling, will get tutored. Maybe we'll have some slippage because some students move away or drop out of school. So we might start with 50 children, but only 45 of them complete. And then the outcome is they're learning and improving their skills or behaviors. So now we're on the rungs of ladder. They're going to get better grades, which is that socioeconomic change, and they're moving on to the next grade level. So we've created, we've actually, in our program model, we're actually saying we're going to get 3 different outcomes. One that is short term, they're learning and improving their skills. Medium term, they're getting better grades. And long term, they're going to track with the rest of their class. So that's really all there is to a logic model. Now, it seems easy, but having to create these theories of change or these program models takes a lot of practice. And actually, I think that they're best done like grant writing, where you have a combination of people that see the world differently. So you can use both of your skills. So if our class as a group was asked to create a logic model, let's think about how that would go. So when you start, remember that concept of backcasting, where you have to see the future vision of what you want? That's where you start. So for the purposes of this activity, first we want to know what the vision is. And so let's identify more than one vision. Let's say that the program we're going to do is a teenage juggling class that's taught at the local Boys and Girls Club. Well, hold on with me. I actually am going somewhere. Let's think of the possible visions of what we're trying to do with these teenage kids. Why might we have a juggling class? What would the outcomes, what would one outcome be that we're going for? What's the vision we have for these teens?
Maybe developing confidence.
Okay, great. So if your vision, Lydia, was confidence, what kinds of things would you do in your juggling class that would make you reasonably think that you're going to get to gaining confidence?
As they develop the ability to first actually do the juggling themselves and then expand into juggling with others, they realize that they have more capacity than they believed themselves capable of.
Yes. So if your goal was increased confidence, then you might have lots of little incremental steps that are very achievable to help those students gain that confidence. So the way you design your juggling class would be very deliberate to get you to increased confidence, right? And maybe you'd want to start with kids who are lacking confidence, right? For your inputs. So because of your vision of what you're trying to accomplish, you then go back and set up the series of things you're going to do to help those kids get there. So that's Lydia's juggling class. Who's got another vision for what you're trying to do with these kids and why you would have a juggling class?
Developing workforce for the traveling circus.
Okay, perfect. George wants there to be more professional jugglers. That's his vision. So now he's going to backcast to the present. And George, how are you going to set up your juggling program in order to get them to the outcome you picked, which is professional jugglers?
Probably something easier to juggle to start with, and then eventually going to bowling, actual bowling pins.
Okay, great. So you're going to have a really wide scale. Because they're going to be professional jugglers, you might videotape them. You might have them create resumes during your juggling class to get them to set up to interview for a juggling career.
I have some folks do it on a high wire on bicycles at the same time.
There you go. You're pushing them to their limits. And so your juggling program is going to look really different than Lydia's, because she's helping them gain confidence and you're getting them ready for a career. Okay? Now, who else has a different outcome for the juggling class?
You might be attracting the teenagers to the Boys and Girls Club just to get them there for the first time, so they get more involved with all the other programs that are going there and you have a sense of community.
Yes, or your outcome might be increased membership at the Boys and Girls Club, right?
Right.
And so if that was your outcome and you backcasted, Ernie, what would you put in your program to help increase membership and the number of kids in the program?
Oh boy. You might find somebody that's a real good juggler and have them go to the schools and give demonstrations.
Yes. And then maybe offer a free trial membership at the club.
Yeah.
And maybe a twofer, bring a friend and you get a sticker. Right?
And you might end up in a YouTube video online with you juggling.
There you go. So because Ernie has a different outcome, he's going to develop a completely different program to get to his outcome, right? So that's kind of the idea of what backcasting is, and it's why it's so important to have outcomes in mind when you design your program or treatment. Because if you don't have that vision of where you're trying to get to, then how are you going to create the right activities and things that you're going to do? One more. What if your outcome was to decrease juvenile delinquency? And you were going to do that through a teenage juggling class. First of all, who would you invite to come? Go ahead.
You'd want to get somebody that they would respond to, that they would recognize as somebody, as a peer of theirs or somebody they wanted to emulate.
Yes. So, one, you probably would start with different inputs. So the inputs are what you're going to bring, the resources you're going to bring. Maybe you pick kids that have been in trouble, have been in school detention, or who have gotten in trouble with the police. Maybe they're even mandated to come to your program, right? And then the way the treatments that you deliver are going to be different. Perhaps you would have somebody that they look up to locally. Maybe you'd invite a community police officer to be part of the class. And maybe you'd have some counselors that are there that would encourage self-esteem. So the whole way that we plan our program is going to be based, again, on the outcome that we choose.
And you might have some students who have to do community service hours. And if you can get okay to make some of those service hours to be involved with the juggling class, that would get that group of kids attracted to the program.
Yeah, we might have the juggling class be from 6 at night till 6 to 10 at night, right? And it might be very athletic so that they're worn out and tired and all they want to do is go home and go to bed. Okay.
Speaking of how hard it is to juggle with handcuffs on.
That'd be another class.
Yeah, that'd be another class. Okay.
Kids with handcuffs try to do the juggling. See how hard this is? You want to stay in the club.
Okay. So what you can see is, I hope what I'm bringing out is the importance of understanding what the vision is for the change that you're trying to get to when you develop your program model. If you see that, then it's much easier to develop a good program model and to figure out ways that you're going to evaluate it. Okay, so let's use a case study of our Learn by Doing program. So let's start with our outcomes. What are my goals? What do you think my goals are for you guys in coming and participating in this treatment? What are my outcomes? How do I want you to have changed after this experience?
An increase in grant writing knowledge.
Yeah, that's great. What else?
More grants funded.
Yeah, so okay, so George skipped right to the top of that ladder. So I'm hoping that by taking this class, you will submit grants. So you'll take your knowledge and apply it, and that those grants will get funded, and so that you can do your community work. So I actually have several outcomes in mind.
Meredith, what about being able not just write a grant, but be able to write a grant with a program, a long-term program in mind instead of just one-offs?
So to write better grants that create more sustainable systems.
Programs, yeah. So
Yeah.
that isn't a one-off grant, that you're learning how to create a program.
Yes. So remember, we're skipping past participation and reactions because those aren't outcomes. But I hope, especially for some of the new grant writers, that everybody at least gets to, yeah, I really learned something. And it's not just knowledge, but at this learning level, it's the KASA. The acronym is CASA, knowledge, attitudes, skills, and aspirations. So not only did you learn something, but this attitude one is really important. One of my big goals is to get people over their fear of this grant writing is a hard thing that I can't do, right? So my attitude is, yeah, I can write grants. I can do this, is something that is on that learning level. The aspiration, yeah, I really could be a grant writer if I wanted to be, is at that learning level as well. Okay, so that's what we want. The actions are, oh, now here's an interesting one, changes in behaviors and practices. So what are some practices that you might adopt as a result of this class? How about using a project charter to plan your projects? How about engaging board members more in helping with the planning parts of a grant? How about creating a needs statement, a project description, and an outcomes as part of a story, and producing a one-pager for every grant before you start working on applications? So those are all actions that we can measure. And then George mentioned, yeah, getting funding for the work you want to do kind of meets this highest level of the hierarchy of effects. Okay, so now we have outcomes in mind. How are we going to measure them? Let's talk about that. So now we really do want to go back to outputs. Outputs are measuring how many people went through the treatment. And I can do that because you all showed up to the Zoom class. We know what organizations are represented, and I can I can measure how many hours of training you and coaching that you received, and maybe estimate how long it took you to do your homework. So we actually are measuring participation. So we have that covered. Let's move up to the next level, the reactions. And those include, did you like the program? Were you interested? Did you like the educational methods? Was it a real bummer that it was a webinar and not in person? Were things too hard? Was it taught at the right level? Those are questions that we can ask. And how do we do those? Well, that's when we go to the use of a survey. And so that's what we've done. So we might ask questions like, was the content relevant to what you are planned to use? Would you recommend the class to a friend? Was the food good? Was it too cold in the facility? Things like that. So that's why we start using the survey tools. Okay. And now hold on, I've frozen my, let me share my screen again. I didn't do a break, but we're actually really close to being done. Okay, so let's go up to the next level. So we did participation and we did reaction. How do we measure learning? So that's one that actually is easier than you might think. I could have given you a test and asked you a bunch of questions about grant writing to see if you knew the answers. But that would have put everybody on the spot, and I would have had to have measured a base level, and I didn't want to do that. So what I'm choosing to do to measure this is I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 5, how much did you know about grant writing before the class, and how much do you know now? Then I can take the difference in the values that you give me and multiply that times 100 to get a % change in learning, or a % change in your skills at grant writing. And that's an easy way to measure your own perception about whether you learned anything. And I've been doing this for a number of years. And what's funny is in the survey that I'm going to give you, the % change in learning stays about the same for every class. So I know that it's a valid answer. Any questions about measuring learning? Now that learning level isn't just knowledge. So I might ask something about your attitude or your aspirations. The attitude question might be, how scary is grant writing to you now? Or if I wanted to ask about aspirations, do you plan to submit a grant in the next 6 months, right? Your answer to that aspiration might have changed as a result of taking this class. Now, if my outcome was at the action level, changes in behaviors and practices, then I might ask about some of the following questions. So I might say, do you plan to use a project charter again? Have you talked to your board about the use of the project charter, and have they agreed to take that on? That's a change in behavior. Actions might be, did you get any grants submitted or submitted? It looks like on my slide. And how likely are you to submit a grant in the next 6 months? That's also a measure of behaviors. Okay. And then on that last level, the evaluation tools I could use are, did you get a grant? How much money did you bring in? And did you build any partnerships as a result of your grant work? Did you get any grants completed? So I could measure that, but I can't measure that today, could I? Can I? So if these longer term outcomes are going to take a longer time to measure. So if I needed to write a grant report after the class was over, then I'd look at, well, I could measure whether they plan to use a project charter and a one-pager. I could ask you that now and you could tell me. But if I really need to understand whether you're actually submitting grants and getting them, I may have to wait 6 months and come back to you and ask how things went if I want to show that I can prove that we got to that highest level of outcomes. And just so you know, I actually am interested in if you bring funding in for your projects. So Kathy and or I will check back in 6 months and we'll ask if you got any grants submitted and to give us a progress report on how your current projects are going. So that's how we're going to measure the Learn by Doing series. So remember at the beginning of today, Kathy said she sent you a link. Well, we're about ready to use that link. Okay. So that's the end of the content for session 4. Now, before I set you loose on your evaluations, I do want you to do one more activity. Just so you have in your mind what's left to do to get to the submitting a grant proposal, I want you to write out what are your next steps after today. So it might be that you're still working on the budget. Some of you may still be working on a project charter. So the order will be project charter, one-pager, budget, find the application for the grant that you want to write a first draft, and then find a reviewer. So if you'll write down where you're at and what the next steps are, then when you come back to that next week and look at it, we can set up an appointment to talk about that next step and how to complete that. Okay? Anybody want to share what their next steps are?
This is Arthur here. So I've got a ton of steps to do before I can submit the grant application. Possibly filing with CEQA, environmental for the site. We need to acquire a letter of intent to sell from the county, commission site drawings and potential blueprints from an engineer. Just for starter. And this week we've been having public meetings to solicit input from the community. And so next week we've got a meeting with our steering committee to throw all the public ideas into the hopper and sift it down to a reasonable amount of feasible and fun ideas that hopefully will make our grant application stand out from the crowd.
Great. So when you say that, you're saying it with confidence, Arthur. So do you have all of that down on a checklist with a timeline so that you know you're getting to your deadline at the right point?
I do. I do have a grant timeline, and it is broken down into the tasks that we have, including the dates for the grant submission deadline, the dates of public meetings, the dates of our committee meetings, dates of city council meetings to make sure that we have resolutions and approvals in place. And several of the tasks, it's a spreadsheet, of course, but there's a column for city tasks, county tasks, volunteer tasks, nonprofit tasks. And so the way that I do it is that I color code each cell with a red for not done yet, yellow for in progress, and green for good to go.
Great. So you've created your own project management system.
Yeah, it's low cost, but so far it's worked for me.
Perfect. And there are plenty of, for cost project management software, but yours is working for you. Great. Anybody else want to share where they're at and what their next steps are?
I would say we're just kind of at the beginning of this, trying to buy the building. So the next step is to form the actual committee and to have a network with a few possible big donors to begin that whole process, and then at the same time write up grants.
Okay, great. And Amy, what Amy was saying earlier was you thought you were going to have to project manage the project, and come to find out the planning department for the county is helping do that or doing it, right? So what is your role going to be going forward with your block grant project?
The block grant is already out of my hands. We are going to need to fundraise and grant write for all the renovations and that step from buying it to opening it. So first next step is starting to throw that budget into the cycle that you wrote.
Great.
Each piece is a lot of work. So like, how much does this renovation cost, and this one, and this one, and this inspection? So we're trying to pull all of that together at this point.
And what's nice is that block grant will be a great match for the renovation.
Oh yeah, if that goes through, we're going to have a very good base to start from.
Okay, great. So you've got some fundraising to plan out, and then a bunch of renovation grants that you'll need with timelines. Okay, great. We'll look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to share what their next set of timelines looks like? I think it's helpful to write them out, especially now at the end of a class like this, because the more detail you can provide into what the next steps are, the more likely you are to plan it into your working schedule. So just getting to the submission of a grant is in itself a project that we need to manage. So however you want to do it, using the grant pyramid as a way to do it, but we're really in the middle portion of the project development. We've already got permission to go after it. So that work in itself might need its own schedule. Okay, so again, you're going to come to me and schedule time if you want to. If not, then I just look forward to hearing about your projects as they get accomplished. So I think we'll give you've got about 15 minutes left. And so if you want to use that time to click on the link that Kathy shared and to complete your evaluation, then you'll get that taken care of. And we'll get the results that we need to talk to our funders, write our final report. Well, we won't write that until we come back to you in 6 months so we can measure that longer term outcome. But we'll have the immediate data that we need, so we'll be well on our way to our final report. Any other questions about evaluation work? It's kind of an abstract concept. The information that I shared is more of an introduction to evaluation work. And so if that's something you want to learn more about and have us apply it to your project, then we can do that in the work sessions that we'll do. So thank you all for your time. I've really enjoyed presenting this in a webinar format. To me, it worked just fine. I think it was great that there weren't so many people in the session. I think that was important, but I feel like I've gotten to at least hear about each and learn about each of your projects. So thanks for your attention, and thank you for completing the evaluation. So yay, everybody.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yes, thank you very much.
And Kathy will send out, thank you all. Kathy will send out the link to the last session once we get that posted on YouTube. So happy grant writing.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.